Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andre Miles, along with Mr. Jeremy Davis. We are the founders of the Take a Stand movement, and today's talk is entitled, Real Quick. So, did you know since the Reagan era, Wall Street dominates most areas of economic and social policy? It sets the budgetary agenda, ensuring the curtailment of social expenditures. Wall Street preaches balanced budgets, but the practice has been to lobby the elimination of corporate taxes, grant handouts to corporations and tax write-offs and mergers and acquisitions, all of which lead to a spiraling public debt. It oversees the U.S. public debt, and the banks are involved in the sale of treasury bills and government bonds on financial markets in the U.S. and around the world. They also hold part of the public debt and are the creditors of the U.S. government. In a bitter irony, the massive increase in the public debt 2009-2010 required to rescue the banks was financed and brokered by financial institutions, which were the direct beneficiaries of the Bush and Obama bank bailouts. Okay, real quick. So, did you also know that the Federal Reserve System is a privately owned central bank, while the Federal Reserve Board is a government body? The process of money creation is controlled by the 12 Federal Reserve banks, which are privately owned. The shareholders of the Federal Reserve banks, with New York Federal Reserve Bank playing a dominant role, are among America's most powerful financial institutions. The increase in the U.S. public debt in 2009-2010 was a direct result of the bailout monies transferred to the banks. To finance the bank bailouts, the Treasury was obliged to run up a massive budget deficit, while the Federal Reserve creates money out of thin air. The multi-billion-dollar outlays of the Treasury, including the Bush and Obama bank bailouts, required a massive emissions of public debt in the form of Treasury bills and government bonds. Only part of these T-bills are held by the Fed. Okay, so real quick, listen. You have to know that we are dealing with a pernicious secular relationship. When the bank pressured the Treasury to assist them in the form of a major bank rescue operation, it was understood from the outset in September 2008 that the banks as creditors would in turn assist the Treasury in coping with skyrocketing public debt. Okay, so real quick, hold on. Hear me on this. Public opinion had been misled. A diabolical secular process had been set in motion. The U.S. government is in a sense financing its own indebtedness. Okay? The money granted to the banks is in part financed by borrowing from the banks. To finance the $1.45 trillion bailout, the government needs to borrow through the emission of public debt. Where does the government go? To the banks. In other words, with the money the banks lend to the government, the Treasury finances the bailout in favor of the banks. So in turn, the banks impose conditionalities on the management of the U.S. public debt. They dictate how the money should be spent. After having cashed in on their bailout money, they impose fiscal responsibility on the U.S. Treasury. They demand massive cuts in public spending, which eventually results in the collapse and or privatization of public services. They impose the privatization of urban infrastructure, roads, sewer, and water systems, public recreational areas. Everything is up for privatization. Okay, so real quick, are you beginning to understand? You're beginning to follow me a little bit? You're beginning to see, the picture a little bit clear? Okay. See, this public debt crisis triggered by Wall Street is all the more serious because the U.S. federal government does not control monetary policy. All public debt operations go through the Federal Reserve, which is in charge of the monetary policy, acting on behalf of private financial interests. The government, as such, has no authority over money creation. This means that public debt operations essentially serve the interests of the banks. Okay, so real quick, the complexity of this crisis is overwhelming. While specific ad hoc measures, including the freeze of speculative trade, can be emphasized, there are no ready solutions under the prevailing global financial agriculture. What is at stake is the power configuration behind these measures. Economic policy quite deliberately serves the interests of the financial elites, who in turn control the political process. Meaningful policies cannot be achieved without radically reforming the workings of the international banking system. Okay, so real quick, bottom line. What is required in an overhaul of the monetary system, including the functions and ownership of the central bank? the arrest and prosecution of those involved in financial fraud, both in the financial system and governmental agencies, the freeze of all accounts where fraudulent transfers have been deposited, and the cancellation of debts resulting from the fraudulent trade and or market manipulation. Listen, I truly pray that this bothers you a whole lot. So much that it puts some fire under your behind and makes you get up and want to go out and find out what part you can play in all of this. Listen, I can go on, and there's more to come. Only right now, with that, I digress. I say thank you for your time and attention. I love you all in Yeshua. Continue blessings. The Take a Stand movement.